So with us every Wednesday when he's otherwise not in town, but he's here with us, cardiologist with SSM Health, SLU Hospital, and SLU Care. Good morning, Dr. Michael Lim.
Good morning.
Love your tie.
Thank you.
I do like your tie.
Very fancy.
Yes, it's a multicolored Partridge Family bus
It looks like
tie.
pieces of a puzzle.
Well, it fits the theme of the topic that McGraw introduced in a second meeting.
Yes. In a second. But first, doctor, I need you to stop calling me. Call off the dogs. I'm going in for my colonoscopy tomorrow.
All right.
So there you go. When are you going in for yours?
He's not
after
turned 50
tomorrow.
yet.
After tomorrow. He said last year to pick on him until he goes.
That's right.
So-
But I have the benchmark of the number of days between your 50th birthday and tomorrow
All
as
right.
my benchmark.
Okay, fair enough. Good to
Okay.
know. April is National Autism Awareness Month, and this is what you wanted to sort of touch on today.
Absolutely. So this is, I think, a critically important topic. It's also a very personal topic for me, as my oldest son, who's 12, has autism. So autism affects about 1 in 68 kids born in the country today, which is pretty common.
Right.
Is it true more boys than girls?
And it is true. More boys are affected than girls. Signs of this condition start showing up early on, sometimes very, very early, like in my son, but sometime around 18 months, and commonly can get diagnosed in between the ages of 2 and 3. And these are issues with respect to this that they call a spectrum, because no two kiddos really are exactly the same. It's not a disease that hits everybody the exact same way. The causes are yet to be elucidated. The effects are real. It hampers someone's ability to actually develop from a neurocognitive or brain thinking, functioning standpoint at the same level as other kids. My son has significant issues in terms of what he needs from a sensory standpoint. So he needs a lot of squeezes, tickles, swinging, a whole lot of things to be able to balance out all the other 1 billion inputs that come into all of our senses at the same time that he's not able to segregate or turn off. So he can't flip all the other switches and just say, okay, I'm just focusing on looking at the two of you, and that's all I'm worried about. Nothing else is going to distract me. I think kiddos with autism have a tremendous inability to do that. So everything just hits them, and it's like the world is complete chaos.
So they don't have a ozone layer protecting them from all the outside forces.
They have none.
Yeah.
They have none. A third of the kiddos with autism don't talk. They don't develop speech, and they have to work on communication in other ways. And trying to get them to sort of move on and be able to do things. And it takes longer and takes a lot of work and a lot of energy.
So a lot of people sort of were first introduced to autism through Rayman, the movie. Mm-hmm. And it seems like we have grown exponentially in our knowledge, but what's the difference? Why is it that it's changing, or has it changed? Or are we just more aware of it now? Or more people being diagnosed with it because we're more knowledgeable? Or what's that whole story?
Well, knowledge is, I think, a very, very general term. So I think before Rain Man came out, certainly I and you and many weren't necessarily as attuned to this type of developmental disorder. And this frequency, my son was born, it was more like 1 in 100, and now it's down to 1 in 68.
Right.
So certainly it seems like it's becoming more prevalent. I think the knowledge part is that we're looking for it a little bit more. I think there is a possibility, and there are some great theories, that many years ago there were kiddos born with these same types of symptoms, but they didn't get classified or diagnosed, and they got dealt with in other ways.
They were just diagnosed as a troubled kid.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. Yeah. And this spectrum that they call autism, this is a spectrum that includes ADHD. that includes OCD, that includes other things in terms of just hyperactive kids and kids that just have a ton of energy and can't seem to calm down and all kinds. And we've always had those, I think,
Right.
for all of time. And so I think they've kind of fallen under an umbrella. That knowledge part is probably good because that allows us, I think, to be able to start targeting different groups of those kiddos to try to find solutions and help.
Yeah.
And the important thing really is that I've read about autism is to catch it as early as possible, to be able, I shouldn't say catch it, but kind of know the signs as early as possible.
Well, certainly, I think we want to pay attention to young ones when they're born and look for those signs. And if we see them, we don't necessarily want to sort of label somebody as a colicky kid or because what's really going to happen is the parents are just going to be completely bamboozled. And this takes a whole lot of energy, and this drives you nuts. I mean, I went through years of my life without really sleeping because my kiddo, if he woke up in the middle of the night, he was up for 2.5, 3 hours. He could not, he can't flip a switch and just go back to bed. So if he wakes up at 12:30, you're not going back to bed until 4. So you're just up with him, and he's just going, like normal. It's like 9 in the morning, and it's midnight. But the problem with respect to this, the key is early diagnosis. I think we need to push beyond that, and I personally, as an advocate for my son, we need to get beyond that. So we need to stop doing two things. One, just saying diagnose it early. And two is we need to stop spending so much money on all the genetic pieces of it. Because what we do have is we have 1 in 68 kiddos born with this right now, and we don't really have very good treatments for this. So how do you actually help the kids that are affected? We've had a minority of studies and a minority of energy spent on those folks, and so my plea would be we need to stop that. We need to really work on trying to help figure out how these kiddos can develop and can learn and can assimilate into our society because their world is very, very, very different from ours.
It seems like two questions for you. One is it seems like there are people and things out there that sell false hope to parents. Do you see that?
I do, and this is the kind of the description I was giving with respect to you go out of your mind, trying to do anything you can to calm your son or your daughter. So you will grasp at almost anything. Is you will get to a point when you're the parent, or even the aunt or the uncle or any a good friend, where you will be desperate for anything. If this has a 1 in whatever chance of working, let's try it. And so this is prime for that type of thing where there can be some things that take advantage of these folks and might not actually work.
Yeah. So as a doctor, as a cardiologist, as somebody who was living this, what do you tell parents? And are there things out there? Are there drugs? Are there therapies out there that help these kids?
There are very little. The traditional concepts, I think, as far as the best recommendations are what Kelly said is number 1, diagnose as early as possible. And that's not bad, but that's not good enough. And number 2, they say to use something called ABA therapy, which is a way to work with these kiddos in a prescribed manner, in a repetitive manner to try to get them to learn. But that's sort of a one-size-fits-all therapy. My son revolts against ABA therapy. He sees right through it, and he says, I'm not doing that. And so there's got to be more than that. Before I came up here, I was looking at a few different things. There are some interesting and new, but they're still small studies. The one that's most promising for my son was there's a medication that was initially developed as a medication for blood pressure that they're starting to look at, which blocks a hormone that potentially causes the brain to get upregulated and hyper, and that's currently under a clinical trial. And those types of studies, I think, are the ones that we need. So we need to find groups of these kiddos that have some similarities. We need to start trying to find ways to help them deal with their life better, because I think the deal shouldn't be that we look at these kids and we say, well, they're different and we need to figure out how to get them to live our life. We need to find ways to help them live their life better. And then from a societal standpoint, though, a lot of these kids won't be able to potentially end up doing what the three of us are doing, you know, being independent, being able to take care of ourselves and do all that other stuff. They're going to be dependent on us. And what are the social structures that are in place to be able to help? Is if you project forward 15 to 20 years from now, and these kiddos are now in their 20s,
right?
1 in 68 people, what are we doing from them, and what are we doing for them from a society standpoint?
1 in 68 25-year-olds are going to be dealing with autism.
What are they going to be doing,
Yeah.
and how are we taking care of them?
While I have you, last question, doctor, because it's so prevalent. You've talked about it before. I didn't know you had a son who was a 12-year-old who has autism, but you've been on the show numerous times talking about vaccines.
Yes.
And how there's this movement that somehow is trying to link vaccines to autism. What do you say?
Well, I think that falls into that desperation thing. When you're a parent that's affected by this, and the diagnosis is commonly made between 18 months and 3 years of age, and the biggest hit with respect to the sequencing of vaccine administration to kids is at those times. There is, I think, a corollary which cannot be ignored in terms of a parent's mind who's going out of their mind. And there was a doctor, his name was Andrew Wakefield, who took advantage of that concept and tried to push forward a deal that might be true. And the only, I think, scientific evidence that potentially was there, and that was that there was not the actual vaccine itself, but the preservative put in the big bottles of one of the vaccines had some levels of mercury in it. And heavy metals are something that these kiddos have a hard time dealing with, and they seem to affect it, and that was the correlation. I think pretty much every study that's been done from the scientific community, and then just this month another grouping of those studies has debunked that. But I think I would push my pediatric colleagues to look to try to figure out a different dosing schedule of those vaccines to help these parents deal with this scenario and try to help things like so we don't have measles and mumps that start coming back, and smallpox and other things we've gotten rid of and eradicated, so that those don't come back. At the same time, understanding what these parents are going through when their 3-year-old son or daughter is just going out of their mind, and giving them 4 shots in this doctor's appointment, which is completely a miserable 2-hour experience, which will take 7 days to get over from an energy standpoint. There's got to be a happy medium there.
Dr. Michael Lim with us every Wednesday, cardiologist with SSM Health, SLU Hospital, and SLU Care. Doctor, good stuff. Thanks for coming in.
Good.